everybody. Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the extraordinary honor of chatting with Connor O'Sullivan. Yay! Many of you perhaps have seen Connor playing with Midnight North, and we're going to talk in depth about that. There we go. But as always, Connor, we like to go to the past. How did you get started in music, and particularly on bass?
I started when I was around 13 years old. That's when I really kind of, got into my bedroom and was like, oh, what is this alternative rock music that I'm hearing that I can kind of rebel against my parents and, get in my room and kind of delve into. My dad always had a guitar around. He had an old Epiphone that he got as a wedding present, actually, in the 70s.
Wow.
And so I kind of grew up with the guitar. My dad wasn't like really a big guitar player. He was a trumpet player in the Notre Dame marching band. I'm from South Bend, Indiana, so I grew up rooting for the Fighting Irish. And he had his trumpet around. He would definitely play that. And but we always had this guitar and an old Trainer amp in the house, which he still has. And so, I would remember him kind of playing it. And then I saw some younger kids singing and playing guitar in Alabama when I was on a family vacation one time. And they were like, he has a band. And I was like, who is this guy? He was like a teenager. I was probably 12 or 13 at the time. And I just thought it was really cool. And I was like, wow, he's like singing his own songs. He's getting attention from other kids, even girls maybe. And I just thought it was really cool. And my friend who I was visiting had some like Guitar World magazines or something like that. I remember I was really into like Nirvana and The Offspring and Sonic Youth and Soundgarden and kind of these like grunge bands. Mm-hmm. And then I heard this kid in Alabama playing, live in his bedroom in front of us. And I was just like, I'm hooked. And I found a guitar magazine there. And my friend who I was visiting was going to school, and I was like just hanging around. I don't know what, my mom took me down there. I don't know what we were doing. But while he was gone, I was kind of bored, and I grabbed his guitar and I opened up the Guitar World magazine. And I right away figured out what a tab was, and I kind of figured it out on my own. And so I was there kind of fiddling around for a week or whatever, and then I went back home and I told my dad, hey, I'm going to grab the Epiphone and bring it from the basement into my room. And I just went for it, and I started kind of learning tabs, and I even remember kind of writing my first few riffs. So I was lucky enough to have a working guitar and a working amp in my house. And so I just kind of practiced, and I was just like learning. And I remember kind of playing a lot of single note lines because it was just easier, I guess, playing up on the E and the A string. And then I went to summer camp, and I met some kids who were already in a band, and they needed a bass player. And this was a few months later, not long after. So I was like 13 or 14, and I started, I don't even think I was in high school yet. I wasn't. And I think it was like the summer before high school, I started jamming with these guys who became some good friends. We started a little band. It was definitely kind of a punk band, or at least like a alternative rock band. And that band was called Velcro with a K. And it was short-lived, but, we were jamming out in the basement, and it was kind of like sleepovers and just like late night playing. But it was cool, and they were way better than me. And so they kind of were like, you're going to play bass, but I actually played the bass on the guitar. So I would just play bass line, like kind of just play single notes and follow the guitar player who was way better at the time, and just kind of follow them. And so I couldn't afford a bass. Back then it was harder to buy a bass than it is now. I've noticed like you can get a bass now for $100, $50.
Yeah.
I remember going to the pawn shops and like just not being able to afford whatever I was looking at, just because I was like a kid. And finally my parents got me a really crappy short scale bass. It was called the Shredder. It was so terrible. I still have it. It's at my parents' house, but finally got that, and didn't last long, and I was playing that with them, and it just wasn't good. And then I actually got this Yamaha back here. It was my first bass, and this is a late '90s Yamaha 5-string that I really modified. And so I like somehow got the money to buy this at the local music store, and I've since like really modified it. So I put in Aguilar pickups here. I had a guy put a nut, brass nut. I carved all types of weird stuff in it when I was younger. And then my cousin, who's a luthier, kind of recently refinished it. So this is my main first professional bass.
Nice.
And 5-string. So I was kind of playing that. I started taking lessons, and I started a band in South Bend called Funk Harmony Park, which is like a blues band. We had a harmonic player, and it was just kind of like run-of-the-mill blues. We also did some jamming. I remember everyone really liked the Grateful Dead, but that band is actually still playing. And so that band's been going for like 30 years, 25 years. The keyboard player is named TJ Kandraszewski. He's actually the Midnight North touring keyboard player.
Okay.
He's one of my best friends who I've known forever. But we started that band, and now we kind of do like charity gig, or at least we were before COVID. We're doing holiday gigs in our hometown, and we were kind of doing these charity gigs for a number of years. But anyway, so yeah, in high school I played in this band called Funk Harmony Park, and we played a lot. I mean, we did everything from graduation parties to Battle of the Bands to we were even sneaking into bars. I was playing bars when I was like 16 in South Bend, and also we were making it into Chicago and Michigan and stuff like that. So yeah, and that was up through high school, and even into college that band lasted for a while. And then we kind of took a break, and everyone got serious with life, and then the band kind of took a lull, and then we got back together and started, because we still had kind of a following in South Bend, so we were doing these charity shows for over the holidays.
Nice. So are you self-taught then, or did you pursue any formal training?
Both. So I definitely kind of started taking lessons early on. Probably when I was 14, I had a main teacher. His name was Kevin Stewart, and he was just in South Bend. He was kind of a hair metal guy, and he was a guitar player, but I really wanted to play bass. And he was cool enough to kind of teach me bass, and I would bring in songs for him to kind of transcribe or learn by ear immediately. But then we worked through all types of, your typical kind of rock bass books. Even, I learned how to read music through that. As kind of I got better, freshman year, sophomore year of high school and taking lessons, weekly, I joined the jazz band at school because I learned how to read music. So I was playing electric bass in the jazz band, and I also played in the pep band, which was kind of we did more pop music and rap songs, R&B songs, Nirvana, stuff that was popular in the mid to late 90s. And then I also started getting into upright bass, and so I joined the orchestra my last year of high school. So I kind of got into that kind of at the end, and I rented an upright and I started teaching myself. I took music theory in high school. So I was really practicing in high school. And I remember being super proud, junior and senior year. It's I'm playing or practicing 8 hours a day, 2 to 3 hours at school, maybe, with 3 classes, and then, at home all night, 4 more hours or some shit, so I was pretty dedicated. And so I was doing privates, and my high school was good enough that we had jazz band, orchestra, and then even stuff straight up music theory, where we're just kind of sitting around writing notation and learning about stuff.
Nice.
And then when I went to college, I went to Indiana University, a pretty good music school. I did not go for music. I just wasn't interested in a lot of the hardcore theory, but I was really getting involved in the kind of the jazz department and taking jazz improv classes, history classes from jazz history, R&B, everything. The main teacher was this guy named David Baker, and he passed away, but he was a trombonist in George Russell's groups, which is a kind of an old bop jazz group. He was a piano player, but David Baker was a trombonist, got into an accident, became kind of an educator and a cellist, and he was running the jazz department at Indiana. So I was like and I took private lessons at Indiana too for upright, and I would take electric bass. They offered electric bass classes. So I was taking that. I was doing like kind of in my spare time. I got a science degree because I was like, I need to get a real job. And I was also, considering doing, higher education, potentially getting like a doctorate or going into the medical field. That didn't end up happening. But I was kind of like, I don't know how well music is going to be as a career, so I need to get like a real job. But at the same time, music is my passion, and I am going to be playing music, in my free time, no matter what, like for the rest of my life. Whether that's, interested in like garage bands, or I didn't know what was going to happen. So I got like a formal bio degree, but at the same time, every semester I was taking many credit hours of music, and I would go to the music school and practice in the practice rooms with the pianos or my upright. I was taking privates, and I was in bands with kids from the music school who were definitely way better than me, or at least very versed in jazz and stuff. So I was like always trying to play with people who were better, and we started a few cover bands in college that were really cool and just some great players. So, but at the same time, I was like, realizing that music is not necessarily a given. So I was always keeping my eye on like a professional career. So yeah, I went to IU, graduated in 4 years, quickly moved to Chicago. I was playing in bands and working in a lab because I was like a bio student. So I was working in a lab, playing bass at night. And then I moved to California after about a year in 2005, and I live in San Francisco since, although I just moved. But I basically spent my adult life in San Francisco.
Nice.
But always just playing bass, man, and just kind of, I've been doing it forever, so I love it.
Very cool. And Midnight North, they started approximately 2012. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I was in San Francisco. I was, working. I kind of transitioned from a bioscience kind of career to more of a tech career, which I sort of self-taught myself. I was living in the Bay Area. Everyone was doing tech. It was the obvious thing to do. Definitely kind of more money. So I started doing that, and I was playing in bands in the city and just playing with Elliot a lot because I met Elliot in Chicago, who is one of the lead singers in Midnight North, and she moved to San Francisco first, and I followed with a couple Indiana graduates, friends of mine, and we all moved out there, and we were playing in bands. Then I kind of got really lucky and met Graham Lesh, who his dad is Phil Lesh, and they're from the Bay Area, and Graham had graduated from Stanford and had like a college band. And he had this band, and they put out an ad on Craigslist. And I remember being at work in San Francisco, and we had this is a crazy story. We had this work office band that played the Great American Music Hall, which actually is the shirt I'm wearing.
Okay.
It's a pretty like nice old school venue in San Francisco. And we did this kind of like battle the bands. And it was this rock band. And I was like, man, that was fun. I need to play in a rock band again. Because Elliot and I were doing we were doing like this electronic music. We were trying all this other stuff. It was kind of like hip hop, a little R&B, electronic. We were definitely not in a rock band. Even though if you really think about it, I think both her and I would say that, at our core, we're probably more versed in that. Anyway, so I was like, I really want to play in a rock band. So I got on Craigslist and started scrolling through like the musician ads looking for people who were looking for bass players. And I was just like, I just want to play some gigs and just have fun and like kind of get that feeling that I got when I was on stage at the Great American, in this like kind of fake gig and a fake band. It was more of a more of a work thing, you know. It's like we were just playing for people from our work. It's like a work party. And I came across an ad, and I didn't know what it was, but it sounded like they might be down to play some gigs. I wrote back and I was like, hey, this is what I'm up to. You know, here's some records I recently made. And it was just stuff Elliot and I had released. And they were like, hey, yeah, come and audition. And it, you know, I didn't know that Graham was in the band. It was just a band. And there was a female vocalist and a drummer and Graham, and I met him. And I got the gig. And it was kind of this hard rock thing. And we started kind of writing new songs. They were like looking to do new stuff. So we kind of started from scratch, and we practiced for 6 months or 8 months. And we finally got like a 45-minute set. And we were like, all right, we're like ready to hit, you know, kind of some of the dive bars in the city and, you know, play a set, like, you know, a quick hour set with maybe like 2 other bands. And it never happened. The singer was like, you know what, guys, I'm going to go do something else. And Graham, meanwhile, was doing, and by that point I figured out, I was like, oh, Graham's dad is Phil Lesh. This is great. He's and he was raw at the time. And, you know, so was I. This was a long time ago. This was like 12, 13 years ago. And he was fresh out of college. And I was kind of like, honestly, I was like maybe a little out of practice. I was like more into production and drum machines and synthesizers. But, you know, I had a lot of guitars, and I still like you know, it's like riding a bike. And he was like, hey guys, I've got some gigs. Like, I'm playing, you know, I've been getting gigs with my own name, playing acoustic guitar, kind of playing more different music than we were playing some pretty hard rock stuff. I kind of always thought it sounded a lot like Mars Volta, you know, or some really heavy like Led Zeppelin kind of stuff. But he was like, I'm kind of playing folk and kind of an Americana thing. But I actually have gigs, and, you know, I booked the gigs as kind of a singer-songwriter, but if the drummer and you want to, you know, back me up. I was like, yes, that's all I want to do is play gigs, man. Yeah. I just want to get out and play. So Graham was like, yeah. And we kind of just shifted. We had a rehearsal space in the studio, and we just kind of shifted into this kind of more rootsy Americana. I wouldn't even call it wasn't even jammy at the time. It was very acoustic. Like I remember him playing a lot of acoustic guitar. Anyway, I told Elliot what was going on, and she has always kind of been a Deadhead and was very familiar with the Grateful Dead catalog, and a great singer and a great harmonizer. And she played piano, also guitar, but we were kind of like, oh, well, maybe you could, you know, join the what we're doing here and play some piano. And she also had original songs in that kind of vein of the kind of Americana folk vibe that Graham was also doing at the time. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of just came together, and we started playing a few gigs. Our first gig was in the Mission District, probably in 2011, I think. And we were going under the name Graham Lesh and Friends. And then we had 10 originals, and we jumped in the studio, and in 3 days we banged out our first record, which I have right here. And that was put out in 2000. Here we are. Here we go. 2000. Well, it says 2013. We recorded it in 2012.
Yes.
And that was when we first used the name Midnight North. So we had been playing for a year or two, and then we kind of had our album of originals. And, you know, as the rest, they say, is history.
Nice. Well, and jumping from the first album to the most recent one that you guys have coming up, Diamonds in the Zodiac. Now, this is a really interesting project because it's got all kinds of involvement from all kinds of other people in addition to, you know, your band and the songwriting, all that. Tell us a little bit about this project.
Yeah, so Diamonds in the Zodiac, it is our 5th studio album now, and we, for the first time, brought in like what I would say is a real outside producer in Amy Helm, who is Levon Helm's daughter, and a songwriter and great singer and a mandolin player, and she plays a lot of instruments. So we brought her in. Graham is pretty tight with her. And I mean, the band has played at the Barn in Woodstock quite a few times. So we kind of all got to know Amy, and I can't remember. I think I think it was Graham's idea, and he was, we had always kind of self-produced all our records, and for kind of at the beginning, I did it, and then as we all gained experience, Graham, by the second record, I think the first record I sort of produced it, after that it was me and Graham, and then the record previously, There's Always a Story, basically the whole band produced it. Elliot did a lot more. Just because, through time you start to learn, how to make a record once you've done it so many times.
Yeah.
But this time we were like, let's bring in kind of outside help for the first time. And so we had Amy, and we found this newish studio in Sonoma County owned by, or ran by David Schools from Widespread Panic, the bass player for Widespread Panic, who's a super cool dude. He lives in Sonoma and has a studio, which actually was, there's a new age artist, Japanese new age artist named Kitaro. Mm-hmm. And he's like it's like new age synthy. It's his old studio. And so a lot of his old synthesizers were in there, which is really dope. But he moved back to Japan or something during COVID. I don't know what happened. And Dave Schools got the studio, and I think it was kind of already like set up the way it was, but he started booking more sessions and more rock music in there. And so we knew our friends who had recorded there, and then we knew some engineers that worked in there. It's just a beautiful old barn kind of in an apple orchard, kind of in the middle of nowhere in Northern California. It was gorgeous. Great place to record a record.
Nice.
It's called Space Camp. And so we decided that we would record there. We brought Amy out. She lives in Woodstock. And then, she really did a good job. I mean, she listened to the demos and she came with her own vision, which is just something we've never done before. We always would be like, okay, we just toured, we played 100 shows last year, and we played these songs, we know exactly how they go. Let's just get the 4 or 5 of us in a room. Let's get the live sound. We'll do a few overdubs, and this is the record, But no, this is, that's not what she wanted to do. She had, very good arrangement ideas. A lot of the songs are more stripped down than typically we would do, kind of more acoustic. Graham played the piano a little more often than, say, normal. Early on, we used to kind of all play piano and play a lot of instruments, but we really stripped it down for this. And then we had Graham's dad, Bill Lesh, come in and track on 2 or 3 songs, at least 2, maybe 3. Yeah, 2 or 3, which we've never done before, even though he was always sort of around, and definitely a mentor for me and the band, and big supporter of Midnight North, but we never got him into the studio for whatever reason. So this time we did. Probably smart. Yeah. So yeah, he's on a couple of the tracks, and Graham's brother, Brian, who we've definitely collaborated with a bunch, he wrote a tune. And then Elliot and Graham wrote the rest of the tunes. And then Amy also had a hand in co-writing a song or 2. Yeah, and then we recorded it last year in a week, and then earlier this year in January for a week. So a couple of weeks in the studio, pretty relaxed, no pressure. They had an engineer. We kind of used the house engineer that was Dave School's guy, and Dave would stop by a few times and hang, and one of the tracks, Back to California, he let me use his 6-string modulus, which was sweet. And then he also, another cool bass that he had was Bill Laswell's 1964 Olympic white P bass. Oh wow! Which was I'm a P bass guy. I think I have 5 P basses. I don't have anything that old, but man, that was cool. And he said he got it from Bill for whatever reason a few years back. So that was cool. So a couple of cool bass guitars sitting around in there that I got to use. And so I think the record comes out November 10th on digital, on CD, on vinyl. We put all our studio albums on vinyl since the very beginning. Something we are really into. But yeah, November 10th, Diamonds in the Zodiac.
Nice. And if I understand correctly, the artwork, adding to the fun, was done by Willie Nelson's son, Micah.
That's right. Yeah, I don't actually know Micah. I think Micah also lives in Sonoma County, and Graham and our drummer Nathan, I think, ran into him kind of serendipitously one day, kind of maybe while we were recording the record. I don't know the actual story. They kind of ran into him, and then they hung out with him, and then I think Graham went to one of his shows. He has a band called Particle Kid.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's living in NorCal too, and I think we kind of just ran into each other. Maybe him and Graham kind of knew each other because, you know, their dads are like super famous rock stars. But we found out Micah was a painter and that he was down to kind of like give us a bunch of artwork for the record. And it was cool because he, you know, we've worked with like different artists, and a lot of the times I've spearheaded a lot of the album artwork, and you kind of get like maybe one picture or one piece of art, and then you kind of have to do the rest.
Yeah.
This time around, Micah was like, here is the front, here is the inner, here's this other side, and here's the back.
Nice.
like many different paintings, kind of all the same vibe, very psychedelic. But it was cool because he kind of just was like, here's my vision. So again, maybe a theme with this record is kind of our band letting go a little bit and letting outside collaborators be a little more hands-on and put their stamp on it more so than we've done in the past.
Gotcha.
So we've always been super hands-on and DIY, like especially the first 3 or 4 records, like we did everything. Like, I mean, everything. I did the art. I mean, I would work with an artist or a friend who took a picture or something, but I would do all the layout and do all the extra stuff. And I even did a lot of the mixing for all the records. But this record, it's just kind of like, you know, we know a lot of people. Let's get some people to help us.
There you go.
I think that's kind of what we did. But yeah, Micah, awesome artwork. I'm stoked about it. I don't have a copy yet. I need one.
Well, and when you talk about DIY, looking at one of the singles from the album Back to California has kind of that home films like shot on Super 8 or something like that, kind of very do-it-yourself kind of feel.
Yeah, that is the real deal. That is Super 8. Earlier this year, we were on an East Coast tour, and we have a friend named Sam Watson. He's a photographer. I think he's from Scranton, Pennsylvania. And he showed up with this Super 8 camera that was so old. I remember he said someone gave it to him, and he found some of the film, which I guess is pretty expensive. And he was kind of just like, I mean, he takes like regular digital photos and analog photos of us while we play, you know, and he was touring around with us. But he had this Super 8, and he was filming us kind of randomly here and there, like through the tour. And I kind of didn't think anything of it, and I didn't even realize he was like taking as much footage as he did, and he was like following our Sprinter van all around, and and like, you know, just taking videos of us like during sound checks and stuff with this thing. And then then he had enough for a whole music video, which was like a total surprise to me. But he did all the editing, and we were just like, hey, this works perfectly. So yeah, it's Super 8, man. It lives.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, and I should mention, with so much interesting stuff with Midnight North, you have your own music production studio as well, Unicorn Heads.
Yeah. So around the time when Midnight North was starting to tour more aggressively, and I decided to quit my job. I was like, all right, I'm going for this. Quit my job. I'm not going to be making any money anymore. You know, like I should probably like have multiple income streams like with music. So I started kind of learning about, and I was doing music production well before Midnight North. And I was like, by that point I had produced and mixed a couple, like maybe 2 of the Midnight North records, and was working on a 3rd. And so I was like, you know, I have a lot of equipment. This is like my little humble home studio. But I started thinking about doing like sync and kind of soundtrack work and instrumental music. And so I had this website, or I had the URL. It was like a band idea, honestly, called Unicorn Heads, that never turned into a band. And I was like, you know what, that's a unique sounding name. It could be just the name for like some, music production studio. So I kind of started doing that. I started building a library of tracks. I started kind of just researching, audio libraries and sync licensing and just trying to get into that world because I knew it could be like a source of like passive income or just a way to like busy myself when I'm not on the road or doing band stuff. I could be sitting here, and I'm not like a great singer, and I don't really write like singer-songwriter songs, but I play a lot of instruments. I play piano, guitar, drums, bass. I do it all. I can make a whole track on my own. So I was just like starting to do that, and I just built up a library of music, everything from folky stuff to techno and stuff like that. And I just started trying to put it out there. I started getting some contracts mainly with the YouTube audio library, and I got a lot of those. And so I put maybe 60 or 70 tracks in the YouTube audio library. You can go there now and search Unicorn Heads, and there's quite a few. I did a couple for Midnight North as well, and that really kind of boosted the income for me in that regard, because YouTube is so big and gets so many eyeballs, and there's so many creators on YouTube, and they're looking for free music that doesn't get a copyright content ID strike through YouTube. Yeah, because they want to monetize their videos, right? So I kind of got through that. That was definitely some good contracts, but it also gave Unicorn Heads kind of more visibility. And I get emails weekly from people who want to use the music, whether or not they want to pay or not, or whether or not it's just, if it's very I mean, a lot of it is very like students come calling and being like, hey, I found your music. Can I use it for this? Can I submit it to a documentary film festival? But I also get commercial stuff, through that. So I've just been making tracks and just seeing what I can do. Like, as far as placements, I've gotten some cable TV stuff, a lot of stuff in Europe. It just kind of, I'm just hustling.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it's what you have to do. Since we're talking about sound, we should probably talk a little bit about gear. Obviously, not every way you get sound because you play so many things, but kind of your mainstays with your gear. What are you playing on?
Yeah, well, let's talk live, because I think that's like the easiest, or it's one little thing.
Sure.
So behind me, I've got my newest bass is a 5-string Music Man, which I just got this year. And before that, I was like very P-bass heavy. And for the first, 4 or 5 Midnight North records, I was playing P-bass only, mainly this like 62 reissue. But I've got 4 other P-basses, got a fretless, got like a 50s Paisley reissue. And then I really love Japanese Fenders. So I got a couple Japanese Fender P-basses. But live, it's going to be the 62 reissue, which I bought as soon as I got a real job in 2004 in Chicago. I bought that from Guitar Center. And then this 5-string Music Man Special, which since I started earlier, I told you I started on 5-string, kind of realized that a lot of the Midnight North festivals we play and just like the music calls for that low B. On a lot of things, and it really helps, especially in like an outdoor festival setting. You can really like move some air. And I was using like octave pedals and like meat box pedals and all these sub pedals for the P-bass to get some lower stuff. But like, there's something about a 5-string, and I'm just like kind of inherently, that's what I grew up playing for, maybe the first like 8 years of my playing career. So I found this 5-string Music Man, and dude, they're sick. They're light. I do the 5HH, which is the dual humbucker. It's a speed blue. I think it's a 2021 model. I got it used on Craigslist for pretty cheap. And ever since I got that, like earlier this year, I've only pretty much been playing the 5-string with Midnight North, which is a revelation because I would often bring in new guitars into practice or try to play. Like, I have some Gibson guitars, and I even had a Modulus for a while, and I would play it in the band, and they'd always be like, hey, Connor, could you pick up the P-bass again? there's something about the P bass that just kind of has this fundamental that we really miss when you're trying all these other. And so anyway, I brought the 5-string, and they're like, "Hey, it works.
This
you
works.
Keep playing it," which is like the first time almost ever.
Nice.
It's like pretty hilarious. So definitely into P basses. I also play a electric upright with Midnight North, which is not here. It's in the van, but it is a messenger bass made in Sonoma County by a luthier, and you can go to messengerbass.com, and it's a nice electric upright. I have a buttload of pedals. I don't even know where to start with that. Bass amps is definitely Mesa Boogie. I have a relationship with them since, I don't know, 2014 or something. So I play a D800 most of the time, which is kind of the most basic Subway series bass amp that they have. They make more fancy ones, but the D800 is the smallest one, and it's just as powerful. It's 800 watts. I take that thing everywhere. It's small. I love it. I even use the Subway DI.
Okay. Nice.
Which is basically the preamp of the D800. And so like our last gig, our last fly dates, I was like, we were renting stuff last month in the Southeast, and I just brought this. And then speakers, that's like a 210 Mesa back there, a Subway. I've got the 15-inch Mesa Subway, and I've got the 12-inch Mesa Subway, all in custom emerald green.
Oh, lovely.
And those are dope. Mesa hooked me up with those. But most of the time, I found a new cabinet maker. It's called Cinobas Amp, and he's out of North Carolina. I don't know if he's actually making cabinets anymore, but a couple years ago, he gave me 2. I road tested some 15s for him, and I beat him to shit. And I was like, dude, these are great. They sound good, but this broke. The things were just falling off. And I was like, you just got to he was like, I was beta testing them. And I think I gave him some pretty good feedback, because then he made me some Tweed Tolex 15s, no tweeter, closed back, that are kind of old school, super lightweight, neodymium speakers. And he made me 2 of those, and they do not fall apart. And those are my 2 main touring cabinets. So it's a 215 Cinobas Tweed with a D800. I also use a Mesa Prodigy, which is their tube amp. I don't know if they make that anymore, but they were making it 5 or 6 years ago. It came out at around the same time as the Subway series, but it's all tube. And I use that a lot, kind of as a backup amp. But I'd say Mesa, Fender, and then this kind of random Cinobas. But now Music Man.
There we go. And do you have a preference in strings?
Yeah, Diodario.
Okay.
My cousin is a physicist for Diodario, so I'm slightly biased. But even before he got that job, I was using the Diodario Chromes, flat rounds a lot on some of the P basses, but most of the time I'm using rounds these days, and they're Diodario. And then actually, I think I was using Diodario on the 5-string Ernie Ball, but I just put Ernie Ball Slinkies on that thing. So I'm not set on strings necessarily. I would say either Ernie Ball or Diodario.
Very nice, very nice. Well, and so much exciting stuff as we look ahead. The new album's going to be dropping here in November. What are your plans for the future? What's in the works?
Yeah, we've got a number of shows and tours lined up. In November, we're playing a bunch of shows in California to support the record. Los Angeles, San Diego, Santa Barbara, the Mystic Theater in Petaluma on November 9th. The actual release date is in this amazing new venue in Menlo Park, which is in the Bay Area, called the Guild Theater. It's a beautiful new venue. And then we're playing Sacramento on the 11th. And those are all kind of release show tour shows, or new release tours. And then next year we just announced, I don't know, what is it? 16 dates or something. I don't know. I'm terrible at counting. On the East Coast from January, February, and March, everywhere from Vermont all the way down to New York and other places, just kind of East Coast stuff. So Midnight North's going to put this record out and play a bunch of shows as we do.
There you go. Well, and if people want to know where you're going to be specifically, because you've got a lot of places, they can go to midnightnorth.com, right?
Yep, midnightnorth.com. And then We're on most socials, Instagram and Facebook mostly, and it's very simple. Midnight North is the handle.
Perfect. And then for Unicorn Heads, unicornheads.com.
Yeah, unicornheads.com kind of just gives you a little bit. I would say the YouTube channel for Unicorn Heads is kind of where it's at. It's definitely where I kind of interact with people the most. And I got a lot of videos up there from, music that I've done with Unicorn Heads to like bass cam videos with Midnight North, or even just like in a lot of like in studio stuff that I've recorded live. And then also Unicorn Heads on Instagram. I'm on there a little bit.
Nice, nice. Well, Connor, we appreciate you taking time from the hustle and your busy schedule to chat with us. Folks, you've seen him here on Bass Musician Magazine, Connor O'Sullivan.
Thank you.